Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that absolutely fascinates and, honestly, kind of intimidates wine lovers all over the world: Burgundy. It's arguably the most complex, nuanced, and revered wine region on the entire planet. But, it also has this reputation for being a bit of a cryptic puzzle. Well, today, we're going to crack that code together.
To make this massive topic digestible, we've got a clear 5-step map. We'll cover the spirit of Burgundy, perfecting the place, touring the great regions, do a deep dive into Chambord, and finally, decoding the label.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the spirit of Burgundy, a tiny region with a massive impact.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it's completely fascinating how such a small geographic place dictates global wine benchmarks. Get this, Burgundy produces less than 3% of France's total wine. 3%. It's just a tiny fraction of the country's overall output. Yet, it is universally considered the spiritual home of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So why does this tiny sliver of land hold such massive global influence? Well, it all comes down to a complete paradigm shift in how they view wine.
The absolutely crucial point here is a concept you might have heard of: terroir. Unlike other regions that might emphasize a specific brand or a winemaker's secret recipe, Burgundy relies entirely on place-centric thinking. Terroir is basically the whole shebang. It's the combination of the soil composition, like limestone and clay, the topography and the slope of the hills, the local climate, and of course, centuries of human craftsmanship. Because of this intense focus on terroir, a difference of literally just a few meters in Burgundy can produce wines with completely different aromas and textures, even if they're using the exact same grapes.
Now, this obsession with place didn't just happen overnight. If we look back to the first centuries, it was actually the Romans who first recognized the value of these limestone-rich hillsides. But the true architects of terroir, those were the Cistercian monks. Founded back in 1098, these guys spent centuries meticulously mapping out vineyard boundaries based entirely on how the soil changed the wine in the glass. And incredibly, those boundaries remain virtually unchanged today. Add to that Duke Philip the Bold, who in 1395 literally banned the Gamay grape from the finest slopes just to make room for Pinot Noir, and boom, you have the historic foundation of modern Burgundy.
Moving on to part 2, grapes, perfecting the place. Think of them as the messengers of the land.
You see, in Burgundy, the grapes themselves aren't actually the star of the show. They are really just the messengers. Unlike Bordeaux or the Rhone Valley, where winemakers often blend multiple grape varieties together to try and achieve the perfect balance, Burgundy rarely blends. Most of its finest wines are produced from a single grape variety. Instead, they rely entirely on nature and the terroir to provide that harmony. It turns the grape into a transparent lens, one that just showcases the true, unfiltered character of the vineyard itself. And the two main lenses they use to do this? Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Now, Pinot Noir is a red grape famed for its elegance rather than sheer power. It's got very thin skin and is extremely sensitive to its environment, which actually makes it the absolute perfect vehicle to express those minute, tiny changes in the soil. Chardonnay, on the other hand, is all about precision. What makes Chardonnay so brilliant for Burgundy is that on its own, it has a relatively neutral aroma profile. So the climate and the terroir can completely shape it from the ground up, yielding everything from crisp, bright citrus notes to rich hazelnut, depending entirely on exactly where it was planted.
Let's jump into Section 3, touring the great regions, or as it's known, translating the voice of stone.
We're going to take a quick macro journey along this famous escarpment to see how these grapes actually perform out in the wild. We start up in the north with the Côte de Nuits. This narrow ribbon of east-facing limestone hillsides is universally recognized as the global spiritual home of Pinot Noir. This right here is where the grape achieves its absolute most profound cellaring longevity.
And this brilliantly illustrates what they call the voice of stone. In the Côte de Nuits, the topsoils right on the mid-slope are incredibly thin. We're talking so thin that vine roots are literally forced to drill straight down through cracks in the ancient fractured limestone bedrock just to survive. That struggle yields some incredibly muscular, structured red wines in villages like Gevrey-Chambertin, and then these ethereal, hauntingly complex wines in places like Vin Romanée.
Now, as we move just a little bit south down the road, the geography shifts into the Côte de Beaune. Here, the valleys get a bit broader, and the geology starts introducing more silty, mineral-rich clays and marls. And that combination? It creates the absolute perfect baseline for crafting what are widely considered the world's most complex, multi-dimensional white wines.
The sensory contrasts you find here are absolutely staggering. I mean, you've got Meursault, famous for these rich, gorgeous textures of hazelnut and butter, sitting practically right next door to Paulin-Monchat, which delivers this incredibly laser-focused, chiseled intensity. And while the area is super famous for its whites, the red wines here are just as diverse. Volnay sits on active, chalky limestone, producing these delicate, violet-perfumed Pinot Noir. But then, right next to it, Palmar sits on heavy, iron-rich clay, yielding dark, brooding, and super muscular red wines. It really goes to show, the land dictates the wine every single time.
Concluding our quick regional tour, we head even further south into the Mâconnais. Down here, the rolling northern hills flatten out into these broad, sun-drenched valleys. The whole climate just feels noticeably more Mediterranean. Because of that extra warmth and the unique clay loam soils, the Chardonnays here, like the famous Puy-Foussay, actually trade in that strict, laser-focused acidity for expressive, rounder, fleshier fruit textures that are just an absolute joy to drink.
All right, Section 4, deep dive into Mazes Chambertin, the micro-terroir proof.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it proves, definitively, that microgeology drastically alters a wine. Let's zoom right in on a single 9.1 hectare vineyard in Giffray-Chambertin. Notice how this tiny plot is broken into two distinct zones. The upper sector, Mazis Haute, has much thinner topsoil and gets a lot more wind exposure. That creates a wine with higher acidity and this tight vertical expression of fruit. But walk literally just a few meters down the slope to Mazis Basse, where the topsoil deepens and accumulates more clay, and suddenly the vines produce larger berries. You get massive density, dark fruit concentration, and these heavily structured tannins. We're talking mere meters apart, but completely different architectural profiles. Mind-blowing, right?
Because of this deep clay and limestone mix, Mazis Chambertin as a whole is really renowned for its muscular depth and granular tannins. Make no mistake, this is a wine built for the long haul. It frequently requires a good 15 to 30 years of patient cellar aging for its wild, almost animalistic fruit and gravelly tannins to soften up and integrate into absolute structural stability. It's a true test of patience.
Which brings us to Section 5, decoding the Burgundy label, reading the blueprint.
All right, now for the actionable payoff. Let's learn how to actually read these daunting labels like a geographic map. To the uninitiated, this looks like a total cryptic puzzle. And that's because, unlike regions that basically screen the grape variety at you on the front of the bottle, Burgundy focuses entirely on geography. The specific plot of land, the climat, is the true author of the wine. So the standard label layout is designed to reflect exactly that.
There are 5 main structural pillars of information on almost every label. First up, the producer name, so who grew or bottled it. Second is the appellation level, which gives you the precise geographic boundary. Third, you've got the climat, which is the specific vineyard name. Fourth is the vintage, the year the grapes were harvested. And by the way, that's absolutely critical in Burgundy's highly variable climate. And finally, fifth, the cru classification, defining its historic rank. Once you know these pillars, you can instantly pinpoint a wine's lineage.
Understanding this strict quality hierarchy is absolutely your key to buying. At the base level, you have your regional wines, perfect for early drinking. A step up from that are the village wines, which showcase the personality of a specific community, like Meursault. Above that, you've got Premier Cru, which shows the village name plus a specific elite vineyard. But then, at the very pinnacle, the Grand Cru, well, the village name actually disappears entirely from the label. The historic vineyard is so legendary, we're talking places like Les Montrachet or Chambertin, that it just stands completely alone on the label.
Finally, you'll definitely want to look for this essential bit of French vocabulary on the label, mise en bouteille au domaine. This translates to bottled at the estate. When you see this little phrase, it guarantees absolute quality control from root to glass. It means the exact producer who owned and farmed the grapes is the very same person who made and bottled the wine. It guarantees you're getting the purest, most authentic expression of that specific land.
And that brings us to our core takeaway for this explainer. Burgundy masters just a tiny handful of variables, basically just Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, to let the earth itself speak. It teaches us that greatness isn't always about throwing a dozen complex ingredients together into a blend. It's about the perfection of a specific place. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought for your next glass. If the grape is really just the messenger, what is your favorite wine actually trying to tell you about exactly where it's from? Thanks so much for joining me today. And hey, happy tasting.